All right, so what we're going to do now is kind of run through the race course and bring out a few little tips that will help along the way. So this first slide is showing some of the first ramps that could be a potential, early exit if things are really going bad right off the bat, or places to check in with your ground crew because you forgot something that you needed, or you just need to dial something in your boat. So the first one would be Benite Park. That's about 15 miles downstream from race start. Benite Park is where the 291 bridge crosses the Missouri River. And as you're paddling downstream, that would be on your right side. So we often see people stopping there just to kind of, tweak their rudder or some of their gear. The next spot would be on the left side, the Cooley Lake MDC access, and that's at mile 341.2. And then on the south side of the river, the right side at mile 337 is Fort Osage. And that's a pretty small ramp. There's not a lot of parking there, but that's another option for hooking up with your ground crew. So Waverly, of course, is the first checkpoint. And, many places along this race, there are railroad crossings near these boat ramps. Because Waverly is the first checkpoint, it is an extremely crowded place on this race. We have a lot of people in close proximity to each other paddling, meeting up with their ground crews. And there is a railroad crossing right there by the ramp. There's no gate there, though. There's no railroad gate, so there's no flashing lights. If railroads are crossing through, if trains are crossing through there, there's really not going to be any warning except hearing the train, and then when they start honking their horn and you feel that rumbling train coming. So we really, really, really need all ground crews and paddlers to be fully aware at Waverly. If ground crews have pets or children or anybody that you're paying special attention to, just absolutely make sure everybody's looking, paying attention to those railroads coming through Waverly. So Waverly has two boat ramps. There's one upstream of the bridge here. It's called Boat Ramp 1. And then downstream of the bridge is Boat Ramp 2. So for the race, both ramps are going to have porta potties, and there should be Boy Scout troops, local Boy Scout troops, selling food at both of those ramps. So either one's an option. If things are really looking crazy at Boat Ramp 1, you might just try out the second one. And it's not, they're not right next to each other, right? So if you're meeting your ground crew, you're going to want to communicate with them which ramp you want to head to, so that they can meet you down there. And on this map, you can also see those railroad tracks just right here, coming in both directions by both boat ramps. So again, everyone just really needs to pay attention. A lot of people are going to have to park uphill from either one of these locations for the ground crews, either along the road, up in the park, and they're going to have to walk down the ramp to meet your folks. There's just absolutely not enough parking close by at either of these locations for the amount of people that will be stopping there on day one. I got to say, like, Waverly is a pretty small town, but Waverly people have been unbelievably helpful, volunteering at the ramps, making sure there's amenities for you folks. It's just one example, and there's many along the race where you have an outsized amount of sort of love and effort put into this race from the local people, much bigger than the actual size of the towns. And it just really shows sort of the beauty and the heart of so many of these small river towns in Missouri. Okay, so Hills Island. Hills Island is 12 miles downstream of Waverly. Waverly's the checkpoint with the cutoff time at 8 p.m. So you've got to make it to the boat ramp by 8 p.m. And at that point, you can rest. But what we really, really, really suggest is that as quickly as you can, get back in your boat and try to make a few more miles. And Hills Island is a really great destination. It's 12 miles downstream. You can make a few more miles, get ahead of that reaper pace. Because, Waverly is really no place that you want to end up sleeping at night, even accidentally. And then waking up in the morning and then trying to make that Glasgow cutoff the next day. If, in fact, for people that sleep through into the morning at Waverly and then try to paddle to meet that Glasgow cutoff, rarely do people actually get that done, because it's just a very difficult move to make. So once you hit Waverly, you've made that checkpoint, you made the cutoff, hop back in your boat, head downstream, look for Hills Island. Hills Island's going to be on your right side. And this map kind of shows, there's a large trailing dike closing off a chute behind the island. You're going to go by a couple other dikes, and then there's, a big sandbar wrapped around this island. And at this river level, it's probably sand all the way across here. We'll have a safety boat posted there. They're going to make a fire so you can see it from the river. And, you come there at night and it kind of looks like a war zone. There's like bodies laying everywhere, just crashing as soon as they can get out of their boat and collapsing, and trying to get a few Z's before they hit the river and make that Glasgow cutoff. If you do make it to Hills Island, make sure you get your boat well out of the water and tied off. Don't just pull it a little bit out of the water and expect that it's going to be there when you wake up. Crash for a few hours before you head back on the river. And so Hills Island is, again, at mile marker 281 on your right.
And the Reaper is going to stop at Hills Island for a while that night, I believe. So if you want to, if you had a close call coming into Waverly with the Reaper, that's where you can get some rest and then get ahead of it and possibly not ever see it again for the rest of the race.
Yeah, the Reaper will be at Hills Island, and I think they leave about 6 a.m. in the morning. So you'll be able to, definitely know when they're leaving. And I would hate to have to try to catch. I would hate to leave Waverly at 6 a.m. knowing the Reaper was leaving Hills Island at 6 a.m. and they had a 12-mile lead. That would be really depressing.
Oh, that's
okay.
Cool.
So here we have Brunswick or Ag Services. It's downstream of Miami. The reason we put this in here is just to remind you of the danger of barges tied off to shore. You can see a bunch of them tied off to shore there. And so, this facility is well lit, but again, we're going to keep stressing to you, if it's foggy and you're hugging that left bank, you can very quickly find yourself in a absolutely dangerous and deadly situation if you get pinned under the front of one of those parked barges. I mean, I don't even know if we've talked about what actually happens. I mean, your boat gets pinned there and then it slowly gets pulled underneath. You get pulled underneath and you hopefully can get out before it's too late. But so that's why this picture's included here. Just be aware that these facilities exist. You're going to see those lights and you're going to wonder, is this a town? Is this anything? Is this a checkpoint? No, it's Ag Services, and this is where a lot of grain and fertilizer and stuff gets loaded onto barges for transport all over the world. This is Lisbon Bottoms. It's sort of developed a bit of a legend over the years. I mean, this is a kind of a more natural looking part of the river from up above. This is what it used to look like everywhere. You can see where there's been a lot of rock work to try to constrain it. The river kind of wants to make two similar sized channels, and the Corps of Engineers would prefer that the river just have one big channel, one little channel. So that's what all this rock work is doing. A lot of people who kind of armchair quarterback this race all year, as they're planning, they'll look at this and go, oh, shortcut. I'm going to just take this shortcut and save 300 yards and leapfrog 5 or 6 boats because, I'm a strategic genius mastermind. That's not the way it works. It's never worked out for anybody. In the zoomed in photo, you can see that rock work at high water. the river crests that, and you can see where logs have been pinned to that dike structure there. We did have one year a boat get too close to that. It was two guys in a canoe. It pinned their canoe to those logs, sucked their canoe under the logs. Luckily, they were able to jump onto that raft of logs and survive and get rescued by the Glasgow Fire Department. But their boat was crushed and never seen again. Might still be there. I don't know. At the low water levels we anticipate, that rock structure is going to be 6 feet out of the water. I mean, you're not even going to think about any way to go through it, around it, or anything else. But at high water years, sometimes the water is flowing over that. And so that's why we include that here. If you manage somehow to get back behind there, hoping for adventure, you're going to find very slow water. You're going to find a waterfall at that second dike structure. You're going to find carp jumping all over the place. I mean, it is just, any of these chutes along the race course, and there are a few, none of them are faster than just taking the main body of the river.
And if I could add, in the past couple of years, the Corps of Engineers and their contractors have actually been creating closing structures within quite a few of these chutes that widened out too much for their comfort level during the 2019 flood. So many of these chutes that even a couple of years ago you could have paddled through, as Scott said, that it would be a slower paddle than the main river, are actually, you can't actually do now. So even if you could get in, you're going to run into structures at some point that are going to keep you from actually being able to paddle through. All right, so next thing we wanted to point out is Cooper's Landing. So Cooper's Landing is right about mile marker 170. It's a little riverside business. They often have live music. They're probably gonna have live music the Wednesday of the race, and it can be extremely crowded. The store has drinks for sale, including some alcoholic beverages, a bunch of non-alcoholic beverages. They'll likely have a couple of food trucks, and usually they keep that store open all night long on Wednesday night of the race. But it's pretty tricky getting into Cooper's Landing. There's a wing dike immediately upstream of the boat ramp. So you will be coming from the left side of this picture, moving downstream. And then, depending on the river level, right now, it's fairly obvious. The dike sticks out a lot. But even the very end of that dike is a little underwater right now. If the river does happen to come up quite a bit, then it becomes a little more treacherous. Most of this dike can end up being underwater, or all of it. And so our safety boat crews do try to sort of mark or light it up in some fashion or another, if that's the case. But you're going to have to pass around and past that wing dike and then turn around, catch the eddy on the backside to get into the boat ramp. What you do need to look out for is a large stern wheel paddle boat that will be tied up to the long dock there. And then there's likely to be safety boats tied up to the side of it and to this public dock as well. So there's quite a few little obstacles to look out for. If the river remains low as it is now, it's no real problem necessarily paddling in there. If the river does get higher, there can be some pretty weird hydraulics that want to push you into that stern wheeler. But if things kind of stay how they are, it should be all right. Cooper's Landing has a campground for RVs. I think all those slots are taken already for the 340. And they're just kind of keeping one area for racers to crash around the store there. So it's likely to be extremely busy and quite hectic, but an awesome place to be as well.
Okay, Hermann is about 70 miles downstream from Cooper, so you'll have other ramp opportunities in between, but at Hermann, you're going to see the Hermann Bridge well in advance of the Hermann ramp. That's how you know you're getting close. And if the water happens to be up at this ramp, which so far it's not, and it hasn't been for quite a while, that concrete section that is this peninsula shape should, could be emerged in higher water. It's not right now, but just pointing that out. It depends on what water level as to how much of that's going to be exposed or not. So just know that things change, and be ready to deal with whatever the situation is when you get there, when you do. You can opt to come in on the upstream ramp if you want. You've got options here. There's an upstream and downstream ramp. Come in on either one, totally up to you. In the dark, it's probably easier to make out that upstream ramp route versus the downstream, just because when it's dark, you might not even see that, peninsula jutting out very much. So it might be easier just to locate in the dark to come in on the upstream. This is the only place in the race where a portage is allowed. So where you can put in at one spot and get out on the other. And that's totally fine if that's what you want to do. If you get in on the upstream ramp, feel free to exit there again, right off of the upstream, or haul it around, take out at the downstream, whatever you want to do. There might be some debris around, just, might be mud, just play it by ear. There are food options in Hermann. There are some great bathrooms just down from this big parking lot that's showing. It's a huge space there at Hermann for your ground crew to meet you, take a nap in a car, whatever you want to do. Lots of room to get up and off the ramp at Hermann.
All right, this slide is showing the approach to the Washington ramp. This is not a checkpoint, but Washington's a great river town. It's got a nice park and a big parking lot right next to the boat ramp. It is a pretty busy boat ramp, probably one of the busiest on the river in terms of recreational boaters getting on and off the river. So just a heads up on that. With the river levels right now, the low water, I haven't been to Washington super recently, but I know that at some of these low levels, this area upstream of the boat ramp behind this long trailing dike, some of that has been actually like high and dry. So not sure the current status or what it'll be the day of the race, but keep in mind that if you do tuck in behind this dike for your approach, there may or may not be enough water for that. But to get to the ramp, the water flow can be pretty intense here at the boat ramp. So once you pass that dike, you're going to want to get over kind of as quickly as you can so you can approach that ramp. Unlike most ramps on the Missouri River, the Washington ramp faces upstream. So that kind of makes it a little trickier for landing. And if you happen to miss the ramp, it's pretty intense current just right downstream of the ramp. And it is very difficult, if not impossible, to sort of paddle back up to the ramp if you missed it. So just a heads up on that.
All right, this is the view of the Klondike ramp. And new this year to the area of the Klondike ramp is Miss Augusta, which is a luxury yacht that is currently based next to the Klondike ramp. So if you raced last year or any year previous, you didn't encounter Miss Augusta, there's a very good chance that you will this year, either on the water during the race, or you might see Miss Augusta docked at Klondike. And so we have the area circled where the Miss Augusta ramp is, or the new dock for Miss Augusta, where it's located. There are a series of wing dikes just before that. So you're not going to want to be close to river left anyway as you're approaching Klondike. You'll avoid those wing dikes. You'll avoid Miss Augusta, whether she's parked there or just her dock. You'll want to avoid that little area. And then there's also a new dock that is being built downstream from the ramp, and that's under construction potentially during the race. So you might see a construction crew working there. So on either side of the ramp, you've got some things to avoid, but the ramp is open and ready for you all at Klondike. You just need to be extra cautious as you're coming into this area. Give everything, you know, like everything else that we've been saying, just give space between you and everything else out there as you're coming into places with obstructions. So be especially careful at night and look for that flashing light at Klondike and instructions from ramp volunteers. So you might even find, your ground crew might find that parking is even a little congested there. So this is the view of Miss Augusta in her dock. So right there, just upstream of the Klondike ramp. And that view is looking somewhat upstream from the top of the ramp that you'll actually be using. And then the picture underneath is just a different angle, still looking more upstream from the ramp, a little further down the ramp. And so you can see some of those wing dikes showing behind Miss Augusta there too. So be especially careful if you stop at Klondike, look for instructions, and especially careful at night to avoid that left bank area.